Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's a modern investing show on Pod TV. My name is Sasha Star, and today we have guests, Dr. Milan Sombrak. Welcome to the show, Mil.
Delighted to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
My pleasure. And Jim Eat from Eat Foundation. Welcome to the show, Jim.
Thank you so much for having me, Sasha. I appreciate it.
So, market is really in the last few days doing, frankly, very little one way or another. And I think we are in the middle of a consolidation, and it will go like this, in my opinion, for another week, maybe even two, and then earnings, and then all the way up. Also, because it's Wednesday, it's still in green. Even Nvidia is in green right now as we speak, although it was down for the last day, two, even early in the morning today. Okay, so that's very little to worry about, and I'd like to ask Jim how you're faring these days and what are you following?
Well, it's kind of an old story with me. I've been following technology stocks that have been invested primarily to take advantage of AI. And the stocks that I have, the old ones were NVIDIA and Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing, which are still great stocks. If you own them, you're good for you. And the other one that I've been looking for companies that are pivoting from their old direction. And one of them is Marvell, MRVL is the ticker tape symbol. And that has been doing pretty well. It went down for a while, but it's coming back up. It's above what I bought it at, and I don't see it. I see earnings still going up. I still see the corporate earnings in general going up, but in the AI primed, and they pivoted from prefab chip manufacturing to the kind of chip manufacturing that can be on demand for AI purposes and can be helpful in controlling your AI and on demand. So these types of companies, I think, are primed to have very successful futures, and I'm on the lookout for them. Another one that I've not been as successful with, but I noticed that Intel, which I had considered a dusty old stock and involved in old technology, has also made a pivot, but they don't seem to have gotten the uptick that I've been expecting. So I'm just monitoring that stock as well. Some of the old ones that are doing the pivots to AI have my attention.
I see. Have you already invested in DJT stock?
No, I have not.
No, not really. I think you're leaving a lot of money on the table because there are some adventurous people who are actually are loading up on that stock. Actually, you know what I expected? That because, okay, if there is a stock, there is a restriction for 6 months for existing shareholders to sell.
Right.
So there is no stock to sell. So if even with the little buying, that stock should go to $5,000 per share and make Trump the richest person in the world. And I don't understand why it's not happening.
Yeah,
Where's the
it
selling
seems to be a bad product, Sasha. It doesn't seem to be, unless you're a MAGA hat wearer Trump follower, there doesn't seem to be any motivation for anybody else to be involved in that. And I expect people like myself, if I invested, I would end up to be a loser. People that were in it at the beginning will probably make a great deal of money. But people like myself, I think, should avoid it because I see it as a doomed stock. It has no future.
Jim, I want to share it with you and with you, Milan, of course, too. I now started to understand the wisdom of why Trump was so much against abortions. Because in the United States, a sucker born every minute. And if there are no abortions, there will be much many suckers that will buy DGT stock and do a lot of wonderful and crazy things.
Very cynical, and I wish I could disagree with you.
Yeah, I understand. No problem, Jim. Milan, how you are doing this way? You probably didn't buy the DGT stock yet.
Well, we promote the idea of investing in the American stock market as a whole in a core portfolio. You can do that by buying shares in an exchange-traded fund which tracks the S&P 500. And SPY happens to be the best because it's the oldest, the largest, with the smallest bid-ask spread. And we can teach a high school student how to do that, how to buy the American economy as a whole in a matter of minutes.
My quick question. I think you will at some point own DGT stock when it will join S&P.
Oh no.
That's true. And NVIDIA and who knows what else. That's true, including bad stocks.
It is already there.
On the balance, that historically has been the best way to invest and is likely to remain that way for a very long time. You know, I keep talking about how empires have 100% failure rate, but the failure of the American empire is nowhere in sight yet. So we encourage people to invest that way and only that way. And nobody needs a fund portfolio. So I'd like to talk about a fund portfolio for a minute. First of all, 3 things about it. Number 1 is nobody needs one. Number 2 is...
don't say nobody, say most of the people, okay?
Well, people don't need a fund
portfolio. If it will go like this for another year, maybe year and a half, it will approach my core portfolio. And at that point, I will delete my core portfolio. I will cash out of it. And there will be no more core portfolio.
There are many ways to invest successfully, and we have to select one that suits us the best and stay with it. Trying to work more than one way doesn't work. So buying the American economy as a whole has been successful for over 100 years, has produced the best results, a little over 6.5% inflation adjusted for over 100 years, and likely to remain that way. Now, if people want to have a fund portfolio, 3 things to keep in mind. 1 is nobody needs one. Number 2 is it should be of a size, which is a small enough percentage of overall investments that if investors lose all of it, it won't change their lifestyle. And number 3 is don't keep records because you're almost sure to be disappointed. Now, having said that, I want to say a few things about possibilities for fund portfolio. Last week, I mentioned SAAB, S-A-A-B, and a German manufacturer of weapons. And so because of the war in the Ukraine, both of these companies are doing very well, even though the market over the last 5 days has declined. Yeah. We are looking at a negative put-call ratio. We are in an inverted yield curve, both of which are not good for the market, so people should be in cash as much as they can be. Mm-hmm. But now, if people are looking for something to do in their core portfolio, consider this. Monopolies are illegal. Cartels are also illegal in the United States, but they are legal in much of the rest of the world. A great example of it would be OPEC.
Sure.
OPEC is a great example of a cartel. And they start cheating on each other consistently. Cartels agree that they're going to sell oil at a certain price. And then in order to improve business, some of them start underselling the competition. They tend not to work. But oligopolies are legal in the United States. And an oligopoly is a condition whereby a very small number of firms control much of a product or a service. And a good example would be Canadian banks, Wall Street banks. All of them have done very well. All of them have outperformed the S&P 500 over an extended period of time. And right now, a good example of an oligopoly would be Loblaws, which is a food vendor. And it trades both in the United States and in Canada. And people who own Loblaws, we can complain about high food prices, or we can take advantage of high food prices by owning company shares that manages high food prices. So Loblaws has done very well, much better than the market over the last while. And is likely to continue doing that because it's an oligopoly. So people who want to have a fund portfolio might want to consider, first of all, oligopolies. And Loblaws is an example that I give because I just looked at it and it has outperformed the market for quite a while, likely to continue doing that. But there are many others, as I mentioned, our banks, both in Canada and Wall Street banks, have done very well, likely to continue doing that well. So that's my position on investing generally. And you know what? It takes very little time. many of our members, Monday Morning Millionaire members, are professional people who we have about 300 of them, and they earn most of their money by working, and they have very little time to manage a portfolio. And managing a portfolio which reflects the S&P 500 takes very little time, very little time. A fund portfolio, if people enjoy it, they should do it, but they have to be at it constantly. And if that gives them joy, by all means, do it. But not required. Yeah.
Welcome to the program. What's your
Glad to join y'all and everything. Later on this evening, I'm going to see a musical. That's a musical actually based on slave ads, meaning the ads that were put out there to collect runaway slaves and all along those lines. But the reason that I was thinking about that was I was wondering, and this is for all of you, how good is antiques or historical information as an investment? Because I know a number of people are interested in antiques and things that are antique based and everything. So I just wondered whether you had any thoughts, Jim or Sasha or even Milan, into this space of investing in things that are dated but are collectible.
A good example of an antique that has worked very well has been the right kind of violin. A friend of mine, a world-class violinist who was the concertmaster of 3 major orchestras before age 28, bought a Stradivarius violin for the price of a Toronto house about 50 years ago. He sold it recently for the price of 3 Toronto houses. He got $10 million for his violin. But for every $10 million Stradivarius, there is a very large number of copies, hundreds of thousands of them, which are next to worthless. Interestingly, a collectible that has done even better than violins has been violin bows. Violin bows. You know, everybody is familiar with the name Stradivarius violin maker. But there is a French bow maker, Tourte. His name is Tourte, Tourte, and a Tourte bow is worth 2.5 concert grand Steinway pianos. Now, if you were in the business of selling instruments, would you rather sell a 63-gram bow or 2.5 Steinway pianos, which need to have their legs taken off to move them, and they have to be trucked over and then reassembled and tuned again and retuned? Yeah, so violin bows, particularly if you use them. And I plan to get violin bows, one for each of my children, to be sold on my 100th birthday. I probably won't be alive, but my children ought to do really quite well based on history, something like a violin bow. And so there's a collectible.
Yep, Sasha, along those same lines and everything, one of the dilemmas that the Cultural Arts Center that I work at has and everything is a lot of people know what a pipe organ is, and many historical churches had those pipe organs, and we had a pipe organ when we first moved into that building as a Cultural Arts Center. It is now sitting in our basement area because it is in a state of disrepair. So my coworkers are trying to figure out how to make it into a artistic piece, because it'll never be playable, unfortunately, and everything, but they might be able to invest and have an investment by having it as a artistic piece and all along those lines. So you'll see some of the pieces of it, but it'll never be playable, unfortunately, and everything.
How big is it, Mark?
Oh, it was a full pipe organ that you would see in the churches and everything.
Milan, your question reminded me a joke. What's the difference between viola and violin?
I don't know. Tell me.
Well, viola is a bigger instrument than violin. So a short answer is viola burns much longer than violin.
Yeah. Top violas, by the way, have also sold for big numbers, in the millions. Yeah.
But this goes back to my discipline, Mark, that generally speaking, I grew up in New England where antiquing was a thing that people did. And I think that in my discipline is I don't get involved in something that I don't understand. Yeah. And although I love history and I love going to, we're going to go to Japan in May, and I can't wait because there's so much of their culture that I'm not familiar with, and I'm going to learn a lot. And but I don't know about investing in anything and its worth and whether it's going to get more valuable over time or not. And that goes for art as well. Art can be a very good investment, but I am not qualified to tell you what is something that's going to appreciate and what's something that's not, except for, Da Vinci or something like that. But, I think if you know what you're doing, because I know people that do antiquing, and they know what's really genuinely worth something and what's a knockoff, what's fake. But I could be fooled so easily.
Also, Jim, don't forget that unlike stocks and bonds, it's very illiquid market. You
Yes.
may indeed sitting on a great piece of art, but if you want to sell it, it may take you years to sell. Right. So it's
Very important point.
Yeah. So
Yes.
you have to have it in mind. Mark, anything else beside the pipe organ?
You need what about with the pipe organ?
Maybe you have some other goods to offer.
At your cultural center. Yeah.
Oh, there's all kinds of stuff there. But yeah, there was even some documents that were there. And of course, there are murals there that are historical murals. They can't be sold because they would mean taking the murals out. But there are some very historical murals, including one of Mr. Duke, because Mr. Duke gave some money that was donated at the time of slavery. So folks approached him about making a donation, and he donated. But there was only one prerequisite. He wanted his face up there. And as a matter of fact, if you ever have the pleasure of coming to the building, you will see that his mural is at a higher space than even the two murals, I think it's two, of Jesus Christ himself and everything. So he said, yeah, I'll give you some money as long as you put me in the peak location. So that's so he had
money talk.
He had an exercise in vanity. He definitely had an exercise in vanity when he was living.
You know what was in the news recently, though, is there was a massive fire that destroyed a lot of historical records in Ireland in the early quarter of the 20th century. And now they're trying to go to other places that may have duplicates, copies of it, and rearrange it so that they can, once again, have a complete set of historical documents. That's a fascinating project. However, is there any money to be made in it? I doubt it. I don't see how. So it's a lot of these things we want to preserve. We want to preserve them for valid reasons, but it's not for investment purposes.
Anything that's valuable and there is not much of it tends to rise in price. So Will Rogers, for example, said, "Buy land, they ain't making any more."
But speaking of land, because I mentioned Duke, and Duke has a lot of land here in Durham, North Carolina, and everything. And some of the most famous presidents, including I think Mr. Duke and his kids, are actually buried on that campus. That might be creepy to some people, but it's very true. So if you go to Duke Chapel, which is a very popular chapel on the Duke campus, you can actually see that is a living mausoleum, in addition to being a actual historical and educational spot as well.
It's better than being buried at a golf course.
That's true.
Like one of Trump's wives.
That is very true.
Stanford also owns a great deal of land in the Palo Alto Menlo Park area. So yes, real estate, and if you can buy enough of it, it's certainly a good investment. And I've always told people that the first investment should be a home that you can live in. Because then you're not being evicted, or the rent doesn't go up every at the landlord's discretion. So that's a valuable. But again, if you want to get into real estate as a profession, you better know what you're doing.
Oh, any other profession.
Absolutely.
No doubt about that. But to come back to DJT stock, which I don't know why anybody would be getting that stock. I agree with Sasha on that and all along those lines. But a lot of people, to your point, Jim, they will get the house, and they will sometimes have people that are having multiple houses. I think Mr. Trump has multiple houses, and I imagine he has multiple cars and multiple airplanes. So maybe that's an investment as well, because maybe that's how he came up with his money, Sasha. Maybe he sold all of those multiple houses and multiple cars and everything else that he had in order to come up with that money that he had to get and everything. Because I do know sometimes celebrities will have more than they can actually utilize, to just use that terminology.
Well, it's a sad thing that happens to professional athletes all the time. They get a big check and they just spend it. and they spend it on things, and these things can
You
go
can
away,
always-
and you can't
always-
resell
yeah.
them.
You can
Perfect.
always spend more money that you make. Doesn't matter how much you make. You can always spend more money. And professional athletes are just a great example of that, Jim, because very few of them wind up wealthy, even though the money they make should make them wealthy. But they have a lot of people hanging on there. And so, just interestingly, as an aside and unrelated to investing, you mentioned Japan and investing in Japan. You know, that movie Oppenheimer has won many awards. They just started showing it in Japan last week or so, because the bomb involved Japan. Where
Sure.
Well, they had to probably translate it or make some subtitles in
Of course.
Japanese. You cannot show English movie, only English movie in Japan. It's not, nobody will understand that, because English is not very popular language there.
But back to housing, we have a housing crisis in North America. Very few young people can afford a house today unless their parents help them. And part of the reason for that is that the average house today is twice as large as the house that you and I grew up in. And the other issue is the paperwork preceding the beginning of construction amounts to 1/2 of the total effort of building a house.
Oh, it's unbelievable.
Puts a shovel in the ground to start building a house, he is already half done. And the half that precedes the shovel in the ground is all paperwork and building codes, and all of these can be modified, adjusted, rationalized, and reduced. And cut the house in size to the kind of house that we grew up when we were children. 1 bathroom for 4 or 5 people instead of 4 bathrooms for 2.
And don't forget about the fact of artificial intelligence, and therefore there could be artificial images of the house done with artificial intelligence or even without it, and you're buying a house which you saw all the pictures or so on, and it would look in reality very different.
It could be a fake house altogether and everything. But thing is, those things that aren't fake, sometimes people that are rich and wealthy, they sometimes pass that wealth and some of their bad habits on to their offspring. So we know that in the case of the Philippines, the leader of the Philippines, I believe it's his son that is now in charge and everything along those lines. And I just saw a story, and you'll love this one, Sasha. Apparently, Saddam Hussein's granddaughter has popped up at a Cartier bash in Dubai. So apparently she learned some very bad habits about how to be flashy and everything, because she's popped up there and people are all over the news media because she's like, well, I thought she was in exile, but apparently she's popped up at this major Cartier event that is going on there in Dubai.
There is another danger also that, let's see, you're looking for a fancy apartment in New York. Okay, so you selected fantastic apartment, 10,000 square feet and so on. And then on the other side, you see the same apartment and it's being sold as 30,000 square feet apartment, the same exact apartment. So you don't know. That's what's happened to Trump's apartment when it was presented. It was 10,000 square feet, but it was estimated value of 30,000 square feet. So there's a lot of rip-offs around, and you have to be very, very careful. It's much easier with stocks. Let's see, the stock is worth, say it's $500 a share. Okay, so you're buying $500. So in 10 minutes, it could be 501 or 499, but it's not going to too far in 5 minutes from where you bought it, most likely, right? So you have
it's very difficult to fake people out with phony stocks.
Yeah.
You know, people did do it, and it was a lot of regulation. You know, people were abused, people all the time. But, you know, we just saw in the cryptocurrency world, you know, somebody go to jail for a very, very long time for being that kind of ripoff artist. It is essentially what people that got involved in all those things. We had the Ponzi schemes, and we had all these types of people that got, you know, they lost their life savings, and you know, people were just taking advantage of others who didn't know as much or weren't as careful. You know, but that's why we have so many regulations in governing stock transfers, stock trades, and all that kind of stuff. So it's really pretty safe. If you want to talk about investing, you know, investing in the market is about as safe as you can get. And
Jim, just really quickly.
If done correctly. Well, Jim, you know that more people lose money in the market than make money in the market.
that's why the Wall Street people have such well-lived lives financially. Anyway.
Speaking of making money, do people still make money? I'm going to mention 3 things that folks used to do when they were kids. I even did it a little bit, even though I didn't do it extensively. But there's people still make money on stamps. I think I've heard you talk about it, Milan.
Oh.
Do people still make money on stamps, baseball cards, and coins, meaning collecting of
Sure.
old coins and everything along those lines?
Well, it's certainly possible.
Successful investment.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
certainly
you can buy a coin for say 50 cents and sell it half an hour later for 55 cents or 60 cents, and you can do it all day long. So I'm pretty sure there are a lot of people who are making money on stamps and coins and some other things.
And some people are getting ripped off. They're buying something that they think is genuine and it's not.
By the way, very interesting thing. I don't know if you follow that, but Trump was infuriated with the $58 million loss of his company that has $1 million of revenue. And I think he's suing all his directors and executives of the company that he was misled. And he had no clue that the company is losing so much money. Very interesting. What will be the outcome of this lawsuit?
Sasha, how much of that revenue was his Bible? Because he sold that nice fancy Bible that he was trying to get people to back, the Lee Greenwood version and everything along those lines. So I want to know how much of that money was the Bible, particularly when you can go in the hotel, you can go to many places, you can get a Bible for.
Con men have no shame. So that didn't surprise me at all. But it was just more evidence. If you need more evidence, I don't know how anybody can not have enough evidence right now. The guy is a con man, has been a con man, and he made his way by borrowing money and then overinflating his assets and borrowing more money when that original debt became due. And he just thought that this was the way to go, accumulating debt, until he ran out of people that would lend him money. And so when he got a judgment against him, all of a sudden he was, first time probably in his life, people wouldn't give him credit.
Can anybody here answer this question? All of us here, the 4 of us here, are not Trump fans.
Mm-hmm.
He has offended all the women out there. He has offended the military people and who knows what else, other groups he has offended. Yet he nearly has half the people of the United States supporting him and would be voting for him. It's possible that he'll get elected again. It's entirely possible. How is it that he gets so much support having offended so many groups?
People are afraid. And when people are afraid, they want a savior, and they want a strong leader. And people are buying what he's saying, even though what he's saying is he's a pathological liar as well. What he is saying has no basis in truth so often. But people want to hear it. They want to believe it. He's telling them what they want to hear. And so then it doesn't matter what the facts are. They're getting what they need, and he's attracting them. All sorts of charismatic figures have done this throughout history, and he has that charisma that people are drawn to. And it doesn't matter how many times he is found to have committed fraud. It doesn't matter how many times he's declared bankruptcy. It doesn't matter when you take a hard look at what he's done, and you would call this guy has zero character. He's not someone that you want in a leadership position.
Yeah, Jim, just go ahead and admit it though. Go ahead and admit it though, because you went ahead and got one of those Trump shoes as well. I know that you went and got those gold shoes. I know that you went and got a copy of them, and they're sitting in your
and the
closet.
Trump steaks and the Trump vodka, and I got a degree from Trump University. Everything he touches, it just melts away.
Eventually, when more people will lose money on DJT stock,
absolutely,
and a lot of them lost on Trump's real estate and different ventures of him or so on. And now, remember what I said before, why he supports abortions. I think that sooner or later there will be a cessation of, I would call it, Suckers Association of America. So people can sort of get together and make petitions to the government and fight together, because one sucker cannot fight all his problems and get any reinstitution. But when there are a lot of them, millions, if not 10 millions, those idiots who will vote for Trump, then you have power, then you have a voice, and you can go a lot farther than when you're alone.
Yeah, that's very true and everything. Then maybe we need a suckers association. Hey, Jim, and maybe you've got a thought around this, Sasha, as well, because I did not realize this. Because, like I said earlier, we're in the middle of the NCAA, both the women's and the men, and all of that is going to be going on this weekend and everything. Why is Barron not playing basketball? Because apparently Barron is 6'7". 6'7" is the height of many basketball players, and all along those lines. So I'm thinking that maybe this is the key to Trump's campaign, is that he's going to put him out on the NBA circuit. I don't know whether he's got any coordination or not. He is Trump's kid and everything, but I'm looking at the height. He's almost as tall as Klingon from, I believe that's Connecticut, and Zach Edey from Purdue. He's almost as tall as they are and everything. So, Jim, why isn't he in the NBA or in the portal and everything? He seems like he should be the right height.
Because there are cameras that will look at you and see whether or not you have ability. And you can't just have someone say you're wealthy. You can't just have someone say you're a great athlete. You know, the proof is in performance. And so he can't do it. Therefore, it doesn't matter how tall he is. There's lots of tall people that aren't athletic. And Barron probably is one of those. But if you listen to Trump, he was the greatest athlete. He was the top student at Wharton Business School and blah, blah, blah. But, you know, you can't verify these things. And if you can't verify it, then you can get away with it to a certain extent. You can always, some people will believe you regardless, you know.
And also remember his claims that he was one of the most gifted learners of chess, and he was about to become Grandmaster. But he got busy with some other things and so on. I'm wondering what kind of Grandmaster it would be, like next Trump University or something.
Yes, but the Trump University, just to take that as an example, he sold people the idea that he could make them wealthy. He could teach them to become rich. Now that's fraud. You know, that is basically, he took people who are gullible. And there's plenty of gullible people out there.
Of course.
And if you take advantage of them, you lack a conscience. And there's lots of people that lack a conscience as well. So these are the predators that are out there. And you have to be careful of these types of people. And to elect them to be president is not only just not careful, but it's outright stupid. It's dangerous.
And it's very un-American.
It's very un-American. I couldn't say that better.
Man, where he is living off the money supplied by Arabs, by Russians, by whoever. He is compromised. Even his bonds were supplied by some of his wealthy friends. Even if they are not Arabs or Russians, they are American. So now he is in hand of the person who supplied the money.
Absolutely.
So how can you make in your right mind a president who is so much compromised, never mind all his crimes, indictments, everything else that I don't even repeat.
You're absolutely right. You know, most of the money that he was borrowing late in his career before he got in this much trouble, you know, was funneled. There was Russian money funneled through a bank, Deutsche Bank, and you know, this kind of thing made him in debt to Putin. So he was always speaking praising Putin. And, you know, this is a terrorist, a man who controls and has committed war crimes. And we're praising him. This is
you know, there have been parties in the past in the United States which have disappeared. Is the Republican Party at risk of being minimized or trivialized or disappeared because of Trump's involvement with it?
That is a very real danger, Milan, and I would be very sorry if that happens. The Republican Party has a strong tradition of good people leading it, and this turn, this pivot to an individual cult is threatening to destroy the party. The most articulate and intelligent Republican people that I know have are no longer Republicans, and this is a reason they cannot support this guy and the people that support him. You know?
In many ways, Congress is dysfunctional, and some very capable people are leaving Congress
Absolutely.
entirely because they think they can contribute more on their own, independently, than being members of Congress, where primarily people are constantly thinking about the next election. They're spending much of their time, if not most of the time, thinking about the next election, instead of being given, like George Washington, who was the first man in history to say, 8 years is all I need. I don't need to perpetuate my power or pass it on to my children. The first man in history to do that. And so suppose that people get elected for 8 years, during which time they should be able to do something, and know that they will never be elected again. So they spend zero time on thinking about the next election.
So you're an advocate of term limits, which makes sense to me as well.
Yeah.
And the other thing that, what's a danger that people poo-poo, and it really annoys me that they do, is that if Trump does get elected, what is to stop him? He's the commander-in-chief of declaring martial law, saying that the border needs to be secured. And by declaring martial law, what's the next step in that? He says, okay, the people that have got in illegally, we need to hunt them down. And what's the next step of that? Well, you have to have papers to prove that you're a citizen. And so, is this the kind of country that we think the United States is where you have to have documentation, where you have to have papers? This is an old movie that you see all the time.
Jim, there's been talk in that same category of, and they say it can't be done because of the way the Constitution is written, but there are some folks out there that are afraid that it could be doctored in such a way that you could literally have a dictator being created if he is elected and everything. So does that mean that the rules that you can't have more than 2 terms go out the window, and we have Trump 2060 or something along those lines and everything?
All we have to do is declare martial law.
Right.
And all bets are off.
Yeah, that's what happened during the Second World War, didn't it?
It's that if people are afraid enough that they think that they need this kind of government, this is history. It has happened before. Democracies are fragile, and to think that it's going to survive something like this is pie in the sky thinking. What you need to do is have citizens voicing their opposition and remembering that this is a land of liberty, and it's not something where we keep people out. We let people in. We try to do it legally, and what we need to do is reinforce the legal way to get into this country, and put the money into judges and to to homes for these people to keep them safe while they're being processed. This is where we should be putting, not into building a wall to keep them out. This is a loser proposition. But the idea you can change this country, and you can. Someone like Trump can very easily change this country to some place where if you're Muslim, you're not welcome. If you're brown, you're not welcome. And if you don't have the proper documentation, which only the government can provide you, and if you're not one of the people that looks and sounds like Donald Trump, you're looking like you don't belong. And we're not far away from the kind of place.
Here's something that's worth considering, and I wonder what your response to that would be. If in the northern states and in Canada, we take for granted the fact that we can buy fresh fruit and vegetable in February, in March, we take that for granted.
Absolutely.
Much of that is being managed and handled by illegal workers who are paid next to nothing, and we are participating in that, aren't we?
Yes.
Yeah,
California's economy depends upon it.
Yeah, absolutely. On illegal workers.
Yes.
Who are, while the people
undocumented,
while the people who own these companies are very wealthy indeed. Yeah. So, and we're supporting that, but you cannot not support it, because what are you going to do? Stop eating vegetables and fruit in February and March? Yeah.
Trump, his early days in the 70s, when he was building, I think, his first hotel, he used illegal workers from Poland.
Mhm.
They were inhuman conditions that they were kept. They had to sleep there. It was very cold and very difficult conditions. And at the end of the day, he didn't even pay them because while being illegal, they didn't have access to the court system, and they didn't speak English most of the time, so on. So probably most of these people already dead. The building is still there. So people would, according to you, should stop using that building for whatever
Yeah,
purposes. But that didn't happen.
of course. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the problem with Trump is that he's using tactics from the 30s, which were used
Mhm.
by Hitler, Mussolini, intimidation. We look at this gag orders. He's going after the judge's daughter, and all this horrible stuff. This is coming from the 30s, Hitler's book. And then once he's intimidating people, then he will prepare to take over the all powers, and that will be the end of democracy, unfortunately. And
Hey, Sasha, along those same lines, are you concerned? Because you mentioned what Trump has done, and I know Jim mentioned the Trump University, and I know that you are a big chess fan. We got that big chess tournament coming up and everything. But do you
Yeah.
think that Trump would be crazy enough to try to start his own league and everything along those lines? So maybe that's his plan on the
Not enough
chess.
money. There's not
Well,
enough money in it, and yeah, I don't think. But the only interest that he would have is to be able to brag about something, and his imagination of his brand is what most of his real value is about. But everything that he associates his brand with turns out to be a con.
Mhm.
So people will catch on, but as Melissa, I wouldn't say 50% of the country, but clearly 40%
Yeah.
is willing to be conned.
well,
They
this is the
they're
thing.
they're they're really wanting to be conned because they want to believe in something that they must know at some point, some level, that they're being conned or participating in it. But it gives them a purpose. It gives them something to vent their anger at,
But Jim,
and
the opposite
they're
side of
angry.
that is the people that want to be conned, but also want to. I think I mentioned it, and Sasha can correct me if I'm wrong. Matter of fact, I know I mentioned it, but they're on the world politics side, which we did yesterday. There are a number of people out there that are not willing to be conned into voting for him, but they're being willing to be conned into not voting at all. Because there's definitely a push that was there in Michigan. There's a push in New York. So there are people that are saying, don't vote at all or don't vote whatsoever. So they basically are in a lot of ways throwing the election because they are saying that they don't want to put a name on the ballot at all, or they want to go with a joke candidate and all in that space. So that is also problematic because there are a number of those campaigns around the country.
Absolutely, Mark. So apathy is one problem, and the idea of throwing up your hands in disgust,
Right.
which I have been known to do. But I usually, that only lasts a little while before I realize that for bad people to get away with things, good people just do nothing.
Right.
And the only real way to rein in bad behavior, such as what Trump has exhibited for decades now, is for people to hold him to account. And just serving on jury duty recently, it reminded me of their justice system. Is one of the things is people were feeling sorry for this guy. He's going to go to jail. Well, he was endangering people, and senselessly, and without caring about could he have killed someone? Could someone been harmed? This is, you have to at some point do what you need to do to hold people to account and not let them get away with bad behavior. And it's just citizens, an American citizen, citizen of the United States. It's your responsibility as a citizen to do that. That means you must vote, whether or not you love the candidate or not. It's your job. It's your responsibility. It's your civic duty. And we don't teach that anymore in our schools. And that's one of the problems. People grow up, they don't know that they have to. But being part of an American citizen and reaping the benefits of living in this society, it is your duty to vote.
Milan, one question to you. Do you know how to teach the school kids not to buy DJT stock in 15 minutes. How would you do that? It's down another 3% today. So how would you go about it?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
I don't have an answer. I don't have an answer for that. I don't know what to say. Yeah.
Well, you have to have disclaimer. You say, okay, learn about S&P 500, ETF, and so on. And a little note, never, ever buy DJT stock.
Yeah.
But back to democracy. Speaking of democracy, the founders of democracy, the ancient Greeks, I think Socrates probably could be called the father of democracy, would not be happy to see the way that we run democracies today. And I mentioned previously, we have a lot to learn from the Chinese, one of which is that the higher up they go in the civil service, the tougher the examinations they have to write in order to qualify. Whereas here in North America, Canada, anybody can run for office and get elected, regardless of how incapable they might be.
So it's a popularity contest.
Well, yeah.
But Milan, weren't the founders, and I'll probably be getting myself in trouble with this, including with some historians and everything, but weren't the founders of democracy not really having the kind of democracy that we think about and everything? Because I am a fan of Socrates, a fan of Aristotle, and a number of those others, but there is no doubt that they were the elite and everything. So how much of democracy was actually democratic, because it was a very autocratic kind of society where the elite
that's a good point. That's a good point that you make, Mark. But they were, when you say the elite, they were highly qualified people.
On the other hand, when the founding fathers of the United States got together, you had to be white and landowning in order to vote. So, we don't have to go as far back as ancient Greece to realize that the elitism is always been a part of it.
What we are very good at, I noticed we are very good at first identifying a problem and then solving it. So you mentioned blacks, for example, Irish also, during the Depression, people were looking for help. They say help wanted, Irish and dogs
Need
not
not
apply. In the meanwhile, much later, we had an Irish president of the United States and an Irish prime minister in Canada. And the blacks have done remarkably well when we first
the slavery. It wasn't just the Irish, Milan. There was actually an article that I was reading yesterday. There was a Chinese family. Actually, it was near you, Jim, and everything. But they were, I think it was in the San Diego area. But at the time that the Chinese were coming to America, they were discriminated against heavily. And there was an African American family. Actually, they were of slave descent, and they actually gave the home to this particular family. I believe it was the Dong family, if I remember correctly. And they are now making a donation to play it back and to give some money to some African American students, because an African American family helped them when nobody else would help them, and bought and sold them a house at a time that the Chinese were seen as the scourge of society, according to a lot of folks.
Oh, absolutely. And we don't forget, that when we were laying the railways, the Irish would get drunk, and the Chinese would boil their water and for tea, and so they didn't get as sick as the Irish did. So they were used as unpaid or poorly paid labor source, and they were hated at the same time.
The railroad in Canada, which goes from the east coast to the west coast, thousands of miles long, was entirely built by Chinese. But a photograph showing the last spike being driven into for the railroad doesn't show a single Chinese person in that photograph, not one.
No.
I'd like to make a very important announcement. I've just checked my email, and there is something interesting going on. I want to share it with you. As you know, today is an opening night, and tomorrow starts a candidate chess tournament in Toronto.
Right.
Now, OTV requested passes for press passes for myself and also Ken Regan to participate in that. I know that Ken Regan is planning to be for 2 days in Toronto, around 13, 14 of April, something like this, but I have to verify. And I'm here, and of course, I was trying to make a lot of pictures and maybe do some interviews and so on. Now, here's what's happening is that it's been a while ago. Nick did application with pictures. He's done everything by the book, whatever they require. And now he sent a letter to almost anybody involved, which says, I got a copy, it has come to my attention that media passes for two of our commentators, see the letter below, have not been approved or denied. Pod TV, with over 2.3 million viewers worldwide, has one show on chess called Chess Stars, hosted by two expert master chess players who had plans to cover your candidate's event in Toronto. We did submit credentials using your website, but as of April 3rd, 2024, have received no response. Our commentators, as well as myself, and ultimately our 2.3 million viewers, would like to know why or what happened. Hope this is helpful. And he signed Nick Poliveda, CEO of Pod TV, member of the Florida Bar, licensed before the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, the 9th Circuit Court of Appeals, the United States Supreme Court. And then a copy of the request for media pass letter of assignment and all the application and everything else. So that's kind of a very interesting thing. FIDE probably is not the most efficient organization in the world, especially run by Russian former mafia members. And see, here is, they are in Toronto on my turf. And what they done, they don't have any phone numbers listed. Even location was kept as a secret until probably 2 weeks ago. I knew about the tournament in Toronto probably several months ago, and I could never find out where exactly it's going to be held.
Right. Nor could I.
They are running almost a military-type secret covert operation. I don't want that in my city. I really don't. I don't need them. It's horrible what they're doing, but we'll see how it will be dealt with.
We'll see if they respond, because I know that you and Nick are waiting to hear their response. So that since it's gone out to, I think, several of those representatives, like you just said, so hopefully they will respond and not give some hocus pocus kind of answer, which a lot of times people will give when they are threatened with due diligence and consequences.
They should do it really fast before the damage would start to materialize, because if the tournament starts today is an opening, we are missing the opening already. Tomorrow is the first round and second round and so on. So the more they will be sitting on it, the more damage they will generate. And we'll see. We'll see how.
Didn't it look for a while that Toronto might not even get this tournament?
Yeah, there was an issue with the visas, but that has been resolved.
And the fact that Toronto has it is a step in the right direction.
Hold on. So that's very interesting story. The visa, it was a tough part because you depend on the government officials. You have to work extra diligently to get that. Now, here, issue, press, pass. This is, any idiot can do it in 7-8 minutes. They don't depend on government. They like the power. They are seizing on that. And the little Pod TV is asking, oh, please do us a favor, give us a press. Who are you, Pod TV? You'll never get any pass. We will decide who will get a pass and who will not. We are going to sit on it until the last moment, and maybe we'll never issue a press pass. Bye-bye, Pod TV. But we'll see.
It sounds like they're afraid of transparency. They don't want objective media presence reporting objectively on what they're doing.
Yes.
And that's the first thing about, when you manage the press, you only want favorable press. And, that is something that it's an international, it's the world governing organization for chess. And it can't run that way. No. It is offensive. So
this is why United States Chess Federation, unlike Canadian Chess Federation, U.S. Chess Federation never really supported FIDE and always were trying to be as independent as possible from FIDE.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
CFC is a different animal. For example, FIDE recently, quite a few months ago, decided that transgender women could not play in women's only tournament. Okay. Now here is right now just finishing Canadian Women's Chess Championship, and guess what? There is a one transgender woman. She didn't do that well, but she's in the first 10, which is not so bad. So Canadian Chess Federation said, no, in Canada, transgender women are allowed to play in women's only tournaments.
Here's something charming. Here's something charming. I was in a hospital recently to visit somebody. To use the washroom, men's washrooms are available to men and to transgender people. Women's washrooms are available to women and transgender people. So transgender people can go to either washroom, men's or
Oh,
women's.
they can choose, yeah.
Yeah.
In
So
some
transgender
places,
people have more rights than straight.
Well, it'd be interesting to see if FIDE rates the games played by this transgender women.
That would
you
be
know,
interesting.
Oh.
Because they could decide not to.
That would be interesting if she would get qualified for the next tournament in the FIDE system, and they would refuse her to play based on that she's transgender. But I don't know, how do they qualify that somebody is transgender unless she will declare it?
That's all you do is declare.
you declare your sexuality and everything. Because actually, I know
But you don't have to.
ex's with the times that we were together, it was her daughter, but she has been transitioning over to the male side because that's how she's claiming now and everything, and that's her right to make that claim because she's even changed her name. This particular young person. So, so that's something that goes on. Just really quickly, I had a question for you, Jim, because it was based on something that me and Sasha found out and everything. Were you aware, because it's in the California area, because I think ESPN is based in California, but I did not realize that ESPN has a chess presence, because if you go there and look up FIDE, you will see that ESPN and FIDE are working together, but I know ESPN, as I recall, is in California. So did you know, because you're in that chess world just like Sasha is, about this ESPN chess connection?
Well, there has been coverage of chess in the past, and I know that when Kasparov was champion, he was very articulate and he was actually really very good on television, and that's right now the best player in the world is no longer world champion Magnus Carlsen, but he is also very intelligent. He's somebody that could represent well. But the ESPN, which was formerly in Connecticut, I don't know if it currently still is, but that's where was based from, and in Storrs, Connecticut, and they have done coverage. Sports Illustrated has done coverage of chess as well, but I don't think either one have a dedicated staff. All right.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's what I was curious about, because I did see that they have like a whole chess page complete with the rook symbol. I believe it was the rook that they have on the page and everything, but it was a page of articles and everything, kind of like you can go to soccer, football, basketball, a lot of the other more traditional sports, and then you can see chess as well.
Yeah. It's all about eyeballs. And when, Magnus Carlsen was involved, when Kasparov was involved, there was a lot of eyeballs. And when Magnus Carlsen was involved, there's a lot of eyeballs. But when he doesn't play, there's fewer eyeballs.
Well, in the way he's playing, he's just not playing in official FIDE tournament.
Correct.
But he's doing quite a bit of playing in internet and in his own tournaments. Recently, he won in Germany, Grenke tournament. But for some reason, that's not being covered by sources like ESPN, simply because no, it's not really constructed for television. It's very well doing on internet, because you can see
it's wonderful on the internet.
Moves, results, their faces, and so on. A lot of interviews. It's wonderful, but it's not for television, and therefore, it's you can still watch this tournament and enjoy it. but not through ESPN. That's
I got to visit. They held a tournament in San Francisco, and he was one of the people that was there in person. But some of the participants were remote, so they were playing online. And this hybrid type of tournament, it makes
yeah,
a lot of sense to me. It's
yeah,
less expensive for the organizer. It and the publicity that they were generating in the San Francisco area was quite significant. And so I still think he's onto something that the organized bodies, the U.S. Chess Federation and FIDE, have not figured out. It
Mhm.
is all the internet, and we talked about Nakamura as well. He doesn't need to play in chess tournaments anymore. He makes so much money just by broadcasting,
By streaming. Yes, he's doing
streaming.
fantastically well. And I'll tell you, I think the traditional chess at the crossroads right now, to do today is the same thing what was done 100 years ago with Capablanca and Nalogin playing and Lasker and so on. It's 100 years later with internet, with new technology and so much that you should somehow react to that and not cling to this old style of chess. So I think Carlson, I must admit, he's doing, I think, the right thing.
I agree.
Make it more sort of user friendly, uh, available to everybody to watch, transparent. Um, Unlike FIDE, always all prizes are
You know, the Tata Steel tournament is a popular one, and what the issue is that the comments are all made in Dutch. Tata Steel comments should be made in English as well. More people speak English than speak Dutch.
There is one thing which is not available neither in English or in Dutch or any other language. The amount of money that each grandmaster is offered just for showing up.
We call that a stipend. As an organizer, I spend money on
That
getting
is
people to show up.
absolutely should be forbidden. It should be like in Carlson. Okay, you play in a tournament. Okay, you are number 10 at the cross table. You will get that much money. You are number 5. You will get that much. You're a winner. Okay, here's your prize. But should not be like everything is hidden, because if you notice, the prizes are not that great at weekends. A tournament of that stature must have much bigger prizes, but it's not happening simply because they're hiding how much they're paying to each participant. And that is always a matter of envy of other players. That somebody got $10,000 as a stipend, and then somebody got $7,500. Why is this one got 10,000? Why is this one got only $7,500? Somebody else got maybe $800 just to be there. That should be completely forgotten. Although some people are being paid for their best suite in the penthouse hotel and the room and board and limousine taking them from the airport. And some people have to take a cab to get to the little hotel and stay in a third 3 stars room.
Well, as an organizer of sometimes grandmaster events, and I never minded paying the stipend because they took some risk going there, and they were generally speaking not well paid, and that has changed dramatically now because of the streaming options and all that. They have other ways of making money, and it's, as you're saying, the chess world has got to adapt to the times. So when I was organizing these tournaments back in the 90s, it made sense. That somebody's going to come from Europe to play in one of my or China for one of my tournaments. I'm not going to ask. I'm going to cover all their expenses, and I'm going to make sure that they're not taking any risk to come to my tournament. I wouldn't get them if I didn't do that, but I was happy to do that. And there was also prize money on top of that. But nowadays, they're not so, they can make a living through chess without necessarily playing in these tournaments anymore. So everything is up in the air now, and I don't know what the proper thing is anymore. Whether the time controls need to be changed, but certainly the way that we all have these chess databases, the preparation of it, the opening preparation, I used to hate it when I was competing in the 70s. Somebody would get 64 at the Russian magazine and be more booked up than I was on a variation in the Sicilian. And I would hate it. And that it's nothing like that. Now everybody, weaker players have knowledge of the opening theory deep into the position. And I can't start playing a game of chess against my opponent until the 15th, 20th move. And it's not the same game. So
the Romans used to say, tempora mutantur and nos mutamus in illis, which means times are changing and we should change with them.
Yes.
So, when the Dark Ages started, say with the fall of Rome, the Dark Ages started around the year, let's say 500, whether you lived in the year 500 or 600 or 800 or 900, everything was the same. You wore the same clothes, ate the same food, had the same habits. But today is different than 2 years ago was, which is different than 4 years ago was. The times are changing and we have to change with them. And that applies to chess as well. Yeah, so.
Very well said. And with that, I would love to thank you both for very interesting and eventful program today. And good luck with investing. And we'll see you next week, same place, same time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Great to see you again. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.